Welcome back to another episode of the Jesus Magnet. Today we're going to do a testimony / discussion-y thing. You know, it's always something new with us, so
Woohoo!
Stick around. Hosts today, myself, Todd. Rude introducing myself first. We've also got George.
Hey,
He's back for another one.
I'm
Hey,
back.
George.
Hey, Joel.
And Joel.
Hello, everybody.
And then joining us, our guest, Rose Johnson. Welcome.
Thanks for having me aboard.
Good to have you.
Yeah. Well, Rose, we've known each other since 2017 when we did YWAM, my beautiful wife Laura and I, and we have done a lot of things with you in YWAM and throughout the journey, being a student, being taught by you, and hearing some incredible stories throughout YWAM altogether. But and YWAM is Youth with a Mission, for those that are listening and haven't heard the what do you call this? What's a short abbreviated term? Youth with a Mission is YWAM. And Rose is a volunteer that works with YWAM. And how long have you been doing that now, Rose?
Well, I joined YWAM in 2016 as a student, and then came back to volunteer almost a year later. So I've been here since 2017. So it's actually, since being here in New Zealand, it's been almost 5 years. So
Wow. 5 years.
yeah.
And you've come all the way from America. Which state in America?
Colorado.
Yeah. It's like the cool state, I think.
People say it's so much like Queenstown. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have all the mountains. It's outdoorsy, absolutely gorgeous.
And it's definitely the fit state, I find, because we were there. It wasn't last year. Last year was COVID sort of came out, but it was the year before that. Laura and I went there for a whole month, and we mainly stayed in Colorado, really, and it's an incredible place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so many hikes that we did. We kind of went over towards the Grand Canyon at some point, and then back into Colorado, and then because we went to this wedding right in the middle of Colorado, and we had to jump over to the Grand Canyon, back to the wedding in the middle of our trip, and then up to Wyoming, and did like all the geysers and all that, and then went back down to Colorado again. Amazing.
Super jealous. Take us back to travel, please.
Yeah. One day.
All my friends are dying to come to New Zealand, but a lot of people here just would love to go to Colorado. So I guess we all feel the same way.
Yeah. So you came from Colorado, you flew over to New Zealand, relatively young. How old are you now?
Actually, well, I turned 22 when I was here. So yeah, now I'm
Okay.
27. But
Okay.
yeah.
And you got married. So you met the man, Matthew Johnson. Mm-hmm. Shout out, Matt. And you're pretty settled in Queenstown, New Zealand, and wonderful friends of ours. And yeah, well, let's just start with your story, I suppose. I don't know where you're going to start. Does it start before you get to New Zealand, or afterwards, or
Yeah, probably.
when you're in Papua New Guinea,
beginning.
or the Kiwi Quest that you never did?
Yeah.
Right?
Still haven't done one to this day.
Kiwi Quest is a very high intense, short 2 or 3 days that YWAM does to build your strength to go to your missions on a worst case scenario that you don't eat, that you've got to walk miles on end, and it's at extreme temperatures. And I don't know how you managed to get out of that every time.
It was winter.
It was winter when I did it.
It just didn't feel like doing it that year. I think I went to Thailand, so I guess, it wouldn't have been the same kind of training. Like,
Sure.
It's pretty warm in Thailand.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
Go sit in a sauna or something all day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hot tub.
Yeah.
Sounds nice.
Although it was hailing for hours, and we went to 45-degree Papua New Guinea, Manus Island.
Not equivalent.
Yeah. Did it teach us extremes? Yeah. So, why don't you start at the beginning is the best place to start. Okay?
Sounds good to me. Well, yeah, I essentially what I want to share today is, a message of hope for people who, don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel, and how God has an amazing ability to bring beauty from ashes, and how ultimately He just desires to have that personal relationship with us, and He wants it to be real and tangible, and all of these things are just pieces of my journey, and so just gonna rewind all the way back to the beginning. So I grew up basically in a Christian home. So both my parents grew up in Catholic churches, but my mother actually gave her life to Christ when she went to Christian camp when she was like 8 years old or something. And so that's been a bit of my own family heritage just growing up. And so she was very dedicated to just praying in the mornings. And so that was really impactful in my journey. And so just, to have that environment was like super and impactful for me. And so basically, felt like I had a normal childhood, and you'd hear stuff like in going to church and learning the Bible stories. And it wasn't until I was about 7 years old where basically I ended up contracting a very severe version of pneumonia, and was hospitalized. And I remember basically laying in my hospital bed for 2 weeks, but there was this point where...
How old were you?
I was 7 years old.
Oh,
so
wow.
I remember just feeling this sense of, or I guess just kind of wondering what it would be like to die at an early age. Just because, the reality, I was very sick. And I think I probably wasn't, close to dying, but, when you're 7 years old, you have so much energy and life in you. And so I remember actually just laying in my hospital bed, and I was all alone. And the doctors were, giving me needles and IVs and whatnot, and medicine. And I just remember just laying in the bed and just praying to God. I was like, God, I don't want to die. And if you let me live, I'll live my life for you.
Wow, and you did that at 7.
Yeah. And it was kind of a funny thing because I didn't really connect that to my time here in YWAM until I guess just having the time to process and going deeper with God, that scenario or just that memory came up. And and I was just overwhelmed by God's faithfulness and how He just remembered that, that small prayer that I prayed when I was that young. And with that kind of prayer, it's not like we can bargain our life with God, but He saw the sincerity of my heart. And so I think that's one of the bigger reasons why, or how I ended up in New Zealand to begin with.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's incredible. And did you have any siblings and things like that you also grew up with?
Yeah, so around that time, my little sister was born. And so I had an older sister, and then my younger brother was born shortly after me, and then my youngest sister came into the family. So there were 4 of us, and so
wow.
Really awesome family.
Have you shared this with your brothers and your brother and sisters?
I feel like I have mentioned it, but...
Is this pretty cool?
Yeah.
That you said when you were 7, Lord, I'll walk with you, if you let me live. And, of course, being a good father, He does. And, here you are, just honouring. It's not that you're living due to some sort of getting even with God, but you want to, just to honour Him and be servant-hearted. You're incredibly servant-hearted. And, yeah, that's really, really neat. So what happened after that? Did that affect your walk when you were growing up from 7 to being a teenager?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I guess you could say, like, things went back to normal, and, yeah, basically when, I mean, it was just a very, I guess, progressive relationship. So, I mean, you know, you go to classic Christian camps, and I actually, there were a couple distinct memories I have from when I went to this, I mean, it was called the Revolve Tour, which is essentially like a Christian, like, girls retreat, so middle school girls, and basically they would, like, have all these Christian artists come, and, like, it was like a big concert, but then they would also have people, like, presenting these skits, and so, yeah, if you know the skit, well, there were basically a couple of skits. So the first one basically was this girl who, I mean, you know, had a normal, like, life. So she had, like, a bag for, like, her sports, and then she had another bag, you know, for her school stuff. And so basically, you know, it got more and more serious as it progressed. And so she ended up getting this bag with, like, all her belongings, like, indicating that her parents were divorced. And so she basically had all these bags on her shoulders, and Jesus comes into the scene, and, like, she's, like, you know, a bit stubborn and, like, doesn't want to give these bags over. And so eventually she gives in, and so she, one by one, like, takes off each bag and gives them over to Jesus. And so that was one skit.
Handing the baggage over.
Yeah, that. Yeah, literally. It impacted me more than I realized at the time.
Wow.
And then there's this other skit that basically, it's called the Everything skit, based on a famous song. And so basically, it's about this young girl who, like, you can see that she's just captivated by Jesus, and, like, in the beginning, and essentially as the story progresses, like, all these life's worries get in the way, and whether it's, like, relationship with this one guy and money, and she comes into, like, this party scene, and then she ends up, like, cutting herself, and it escalates to the point where she actually is about to take her life. And then she, like, in each point she, like, looks back at Jesus, but at that final point she just throws everything aside and, like, runs full force, like, at Jesus. And then all these things are essentially pulling her back, but then the story essentially climaxes to this point where Jesus steps between her and all these different life's worries, like, getting in the way, and essentially just breaks all that off of her. And so she's just completely liberated, and he basically just brushes her off and picks her up and twirls her around and is back, you know, to the beginning. So yeah, both of these skits were super foundational for me, especially with some things that came around the corner. Not even, just after middle school. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, if you don't know the skits, I feel like we've seen them on YouTube before, so look them up. They're definitely
Rose and
powerful.
I performed them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a cool part of how, like, God brings things full circle. So,
Yeah. That is definitely my favourite skit. I quite like the Chains one as well. But one thing I like about the Everything skit is, and I'm sure if you Google or YouTube Everything skit Christian or something like that, you'll find it. And we encourage any listener listening to pause the podcast right now and go watch that, and you'll see what we're talking about. It is very, very powerful. It's probably only about maybe an 8 or 9 minute video. Yeah. But it's really cool because there's one point where when Jesus steps in between the girl and all these addictions, and there's alcohol and there's money and there's lust and all these things, and he ends up taking a beating from them. Like, they're bashing him, and he's shielding her while he's taking that beating. And then he erupts and stands up really, really suddenly, and every addiction and everything falls on the ground, defeated and totally overcome. And I think it expands on that, and because these also represent principalities and powers around the planet tormenting us, and it even gets to the point where they're on their knees worshipping or acknowledging Jesus Christ as Lord, which goes to the scripture that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, including the demons, that encourage us to have lustful thoughts and alcohol and money addictions and things like that. Like, it's such a powerful skit. Like, I've never seen the gospel shown so clearly in like 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, so clearly. We did this skit with this amazing guy who's been on the podcast as well, Douglas Gonzalez, and he looks like Jesus.
Yeah, he has a beard.
He's got the beard, he's got the hair, and he's got a cross on his arm as well. So when he's doing the skit, especially when we were in Papua New Guinea doing the skit, when we were doing Youth with a Mission, you didn't have to explain to these people that couldn't speak our language who Douglas was, who he was portraying. Yeah, very cool. Sorry. I jump in. Off you go. Where are we now after you've seen that skit?
Yeah, so essentially that was when I was about, I'd say 12, 13 years old. So very, I guess that's where a lot of those adult decisions kind of come into play, where you start to transition from, okay, this is what my parents taught me, to I'm actually going to own this for myself. And so that was a really key point in my life. And actually, it wasn't soon after that when, like, my life as I knew it was about to take a turn for the worse. And basically, when towards the end of my 8th grade year, so when I was 14 years old, there was this breaking point in my family. And without going too deep into details, basically, my family ended up going through this very, rugged divorce. And so, like, all this normal childhood that I had almost felt like it was a dream in comparison. And so I entered high school, which here in New Zealand, I think it's called college, right?
I think it's called high school.
Is it high school?
Yeah.
We don't really go by the college.
I've heard many different terms. But yeah, so when I entered high school, I essentially was that girl from the first skit. And for a period of time, I couldn't see my dad for like maybe an hour a week. And then eventually, as time progressed, everything started to pan out where I ended up going between both houses every 4 days. And essentially, like, to drown out all of the chaos that was going on in my life, I would, I was a part of the swim team, and I was like buried my head into my academics, and really, it took root in that. But yeah, it was essentially the valley of my life, where, everything I once knew was now changed. And, and so essentially I remember, like, going through high school, like, feeling like the only hope I had was when I went to college or uni. And essentially when my parents split, there was this void in my heart that was developed. And it was this place in my heart of longing for essentially God's love is what I realized later on. But it's just so cool to see how, like, in spite of essentially my life being in shambles, I could, like, looking back now, I can see God's faithfulness through that time. And I remember there was one time I was transitioning from my mom's house to my dad's house, and I was grabbing my bags from my mom's car. It was nighttime, and I actually, my mind went back to that skit of that girl who had all those bags, and I just felt the heaviness. Like, it wasn't just the physical heaviness, but just, like, the spiritual, like, heaviness that was weighing down my shoulders. And I remember looking up at the stars, and immediately I just felt God's peace just come down onto me, and I just felt like he was just saying, I'm with you. And I mean, it didn't necessarily, like, change things overnight, but there was something very special in knowing that, like, God was with me, even though, like, my world was falling apart around me.
You knew you weren't alone.
Yeah.
In what you're walking through.
Yeah. And it was also incredible because during this time, like, you know, a couple years later, basically there was a girls' Bible study that ended up developing. So there were 5 ladies about the same age as me, and and this mother and her daughter wanted to lead this Bible study, and it ended up that her other daughter was a part of Youth with a Mission, and so that was one of the avenues I found out about Youth with a Mission. But that also is something that struck my heart on fire for studying the Bible in, like, a small group setting and, like, actually going deeper. So that was a really cool time of my life, even though it was very hard at times.
Yeah, because now you teach the Bible. Well, last year we went and did a discipleship Bible school, and you ran it. And so we went through the entire Bible in 3 months. I mean, we did the evening edition, so it was quite a condensed version of of the actual school. But, Laura and I got a huge amount out of that. That was one of the most intense after work study groups I've ever done. Like, I think I was reading the Bible almost 2 hours a day. That's what I had to put it to. And the way I got through it was, here's a little life hack if you are reading the Bible. We've talked about this in our New Christian episode. I think it's episode 13. When you're reading the Bible, you put the audio Bible in your ears. Rose actually told us to do that. And when you're listening to it, you're listening and reading along to the Bible, 1.25 speed, and you can still follow pretty easily. And it keeps the pace up, because I don't know if you guys ever read for a little while and then it's like, I've read 2 pages. I've read 2 pages and I haven't read any words. My eyes have just been going over the page. Does that happen to you guys?
Yeah. I did that this morning. I was like, I'm pretty sure I've read this verse already. Like, what's going on, brain? Keep reading.
Or you read the same line.
Yeah.
Just over and over again because you don't register what you've read.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this avoids that. And brilliant way to read the Bible. Definitely recommend it. So that's so cool that you're fully walking out, teaching, and have that passion to teach the word and to live it. And you're definitely walking in your gifts.
Yeah. Hey, Rose, so leading up to that time when you went in to do Bible study, did you have any friends at high school or college who got around you and maybe tried to bring you into...
Like in a positive influence?
Yeah, in a positive influence, yeah.
So I guess just kind of picking up from where we left off, like, so I had that Bible study, which was really huge. And so then I ended up going to a university to study mechanical engineering, and but it was like really cool because there is this really large church in Colorado Springs called New Life, and they had a group essentially called Friday Nights, and basically a lot of younger, like 20-something, the younger age group was attracted to this church, and so that was a really fun thing to look forward to essentially go to church with your friends, and to have positive influence in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I just find it interesting that on the journey to salvation or to meeting the Lord, who actually comes along into our lives at times when we think we're just completely by ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. But it's amazing how those skits spoke to you just at that time in your life.
Yeah, and it was really when I needed it the most.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even though when I was watching it, it wasn't necessarily registering with my life, but I could at least comprehend that, like, God wanted to have that personal relationship with me. And then later on when storms came, like, I could see, like, how God was still, like, always there through that whole process.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah.
That's cool. So from sort of hearing about YWAM and all that, how did you end up in New Zealand of all places?
Well, yeah. So essentially, it's a long story, but yeah. So how I initially found out about YWAM, ironically, was through someone I dated in high school. So basically, to connect back to, like when my parents divorced, there was this void in my heart. And so essentially, like, that void, necessarily, like, it wasn't filled by, like, other things, but I think one of the ways I was essentially seeking for God's love was through different relationships. But it's ironic because, God really got my attention through that. So, this relationship I was in wasn't the healthiest, but what really marked me was to see this guy essentially go to, he went to do this school through YWAM, and he went to Kona, and I just remember, like, I was, in uni while he was off doing this school, and I remember just seeing, like, for the first time, this genuine smile on his face.
Wow.
And, I went to prom with him. I did, whatever for however long. And I didn't see that same kind of genuine joy and just deep, just peace that he carried in that picture. And when I saw that, I just knew, I was like, I want that. Like, I actually, like, if it's possible for me to go even deeper with God, like, I don't want to essentially go through the motions through my whole life. And I mean, I was set up, like, I was working on my degree at the time, and, was, smart, and, I knew I could excel in what I did. Like, I mean, like, and the classic American dream is to have, a White House, beautiful family with, the average kid, 2.5 kids, with, like a white picket fence, and
except you're an engineer, not a housewife.
It's true.
That is amazing.
Just means I would have to find a husband with
house
husband. But yeah, I mean, like, everything was lined up for me, but I just saw essentially the emptiness in that, like, because if I essentially chased after that dream, or whatever, the American dream, I guess, and put off, like, going deeper with God until I was, like, 80 and essentially pray the salvation prayer and just get zapped to heaven. Like, I don't know. It's just, I feel like, I would have been missing out on something. And so I just knew deep down, I was like, if I'm actually going to, like, live my whole life, like, I want to, like, invest this time right now to go deep and to actually, like, I mean, because if life is all about God and, like, knowing who he is, and like, I'm going to invest this time in my life. So then, I mean, essentially when I have a career or whatever, like, that is the first priority.
Yeah.
And obviously looking back, like, I'm not currently practicing in engineering right now, but I have seen how God has actually used that within a ministry context.
Oh, wow.
And I like, it's not like I hated engineering. I am one of those really few odd people that happen to be really passionate about, nerding out in math and creating stuff. And, and so like, it's not that, I wanted to drop out to do missions, but I just found something even richer and more fulfilling in essentially walking with people and pointing me to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I see that as something that's going to last for eternity. Whereas like with engineering, I can build a bridge, but it's going to come down in a couple 100 years. And, but I want to, invest my life into something that's going to last forever.
Mm. One of the funniest things that when Laura and I first met you, it was doing Youth with a Mission. And Laura and I had sort of started a little bit of business before, and decided to go and do Youth with a Mission. And the first thing we noticed is there's youth, obviously. And youth, 99 times out of 100 have no idea what they're doing in life, really. They're at the start of their life. It makes sense. And they've never really done anything or been anywhere or become anyone yet. They have these ambitions and stuff. And in YWAM especially, they seem to be a little bit floaty, in my opinion, a little bit sometimes. Like, God will direct me where I am to be, which seems like a very, very vague answer when I would say, where do you want to go in life? Just wherever God asked me to go. And when I met Rose, it was a similar answer. And I was like, oh, here we go, another ditzy YWAMer. And then she goes, oh yeah, and I'm an engineer. And I was like, what? You've got this heart on fire for God. And I did not pick you being somebody with this huge, like, don't get me wrong, but this huge amount of intelligence behind you. You just seemed very like, and when some people are too spiritual for this world? Mm-hmm. That's not a bad thing, but it usually isn't associated with someone who is nerds out on math and likes building and constructing things. So it was like two total opposites in one person. And Laura and I went, I'm never judging anybody ever again. And Lord, I repent.
To be fair, I feel like I'm a paradox in a person. So yeah, I have I'm both super nerdy and mathy and all that stuff, but I also have this artsy, I love painting, and so we like to put people in boxes, and God likes to break down those boxes, and I'm one of those people that God made to break down that box.
I felt so bad. Yeah. All right. Well, you got to YWAM, and what happened next?
Yeah. So. Well, I guess I'll share a bit leading up to YWAM. So, yeah.
Todd's trying to slowly walk out of the studio.
See you, Todd.
But, yeah, so basically, was bent on coming to YWAM, essentially waited for 3 years, and, was in and out of relationships, and towards the end of my college career, I was just yep, I'm going to do this. Just 6 months. I'll just do engineering afterwards. All good.
5 years later.
God likes to, blow our expectations out of the water. So, but yeah, so I looked through probably over 100 different schools. They had had a website online, and And yeah, basically I came across this one called the Lighthouse Discipleship Training School. And like I rounded down to like a handful, but this one just really captivated me. And, basically the heart of the school was to, just go deeper in intimacy with God. And then, it also had a emphasis on worship and prayer. And then it also had an outreach that was focused on like a justice outreach. And yeah, so basically, I just knew that was the school I was supposed to go to. And so a week before I graduated, I, was saving up money, like, yep, like as long as all these ducks are in a row, we'll be set to go. And that's when, like, essentially there were some, what's the word? Hurdles in the road. And so 1 week later, I ended up going to my graduation, and I had this awesome graduation party. And basically, as I was taking my younger brother and sister home to my mom's house, basically got in a crazy car accident. And so, I didn't have insurance on my, like, full coverage on my car. So, like, in an instant, basically,
wow.
All this money that I had saved up, I was like, oh, well, does that mean, like, either I buy a new car and keep on working and saving up and let this school pass me by, or am I going to take this school? And I also happened to get a ticket. So it was a T-bone collision. So essentially, as I was crossing an intersection, this other car impacted the side of my car. And it was at nighttime, so there's obscure vision, and the other car didn't slow down. Just a lot of crazy stuff. And so both of us got a ticket, and it was supposed to happen during the time when I was going to be at this school. And so if you have a ticket, you have to show up, and you can't be out of the country. And so there was kind of like this moment of like, okay, well, either I just let this slide by, or am I going to fight for it and actually go to the school? And basically I went to, I found a lawyer and essentially got it all sorted out the day I left the country. So within a month and a half, all this got sorted, and it was a straight miracle. I can't explain it. But yeah, I just, I dug my heels in the ground. I was like, no, this is what the school that God has called me to go to. And yeah.
Was that the school in New Zealand?
So that was the school in New Zealand.
Okay.
So yeah, it was, and I think, looking back, I actually think some of that might have been what you would call spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
But because ultimately the enemy sees us and he's like, wow, a school that's going to point you more to God, and you get to grow in your identity, and you're going to impact others through that. I don't want you to go to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, really it was just a miracle that I was able to go to that. And so I lost, essentially everything I lost, God gave it back, in some capacity. So I invested all this money to go to school. My car was lost. I ended up giving up this job, which my employer at the time actually gave me a raise. He was like, essentially, if you keep on working for me, I'll give you an extra bonus. And at the time I was working as an intern at a tool manufacturing company. So I was able to nerd out and make all these fixtures and, essentially create these designs in the computer. But yeah, so essentially all these things were, I sacrificed to go to the school. And
do you think that, how you think that maybe it was demonic activity, with the car crash sort of thing, like last resort to get to not go. But do you think that Satan and his demons have a point or another way to get people to not go and to do the opposite, like raises, like giving you a pay rise, and things like that.
Well, and actually, I found out later when I was already taking the school that basically from the couple, they were saying that there were five things that will usually cause students to not go to school. And essentially, I experienced 4 out of the 5. So it could be stuff like raises, near-death experiences, illness, financial issues. So, I experienced quite a bit of that. So I don't think, now that I'm staffing, it's like, well, maybe there was, something the enemy saw in me at the time that he did not want me to be a part of the school.
The financial one's a funny one. We had, I don't know how many students. Oh, excuse me. I don't know how many students it was that didn't have the full funds to do our school. And there's quite a lot of them, I think Douglas was one of them. And they just were like, when we got there, actually Laura and I were one of them, we had just put a deposit on some land, and it was the exact amount that the school cost.
Wow.
And we didn't, it was like, all right, this money is to go to our house that we're going to build in a year's time. And we ended up going, God said, all in, all or nothing. Now, my wife and I, for the listeners that don't know, we live in a really beautiful 1-bedroom flat, so like a unit. And we live above my grandparents, and it's incredible. And when we went and spoke to the school leaders, they said, if you want to do YWAM, if you want to be all in, not 1 foot in and 1 foot out, all in. And what that means is we want you to live with YWAM students as well. And Laura and I were maybe the first or one of the first married couples to do YWAM. Normally, like I said earlier, it's youth. And, well, Laura and I aren't old. But
I was like, hold on a second.
we were youngly married. But this meant like a young married couple, which we were living by ourselves, now had to go share a house. And this might not sound too bad, but wait until I tell you that I was a guy with my wife living in the girls' house with 18 other women.
Toilet seat down, please.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right, Lord, all in or not at all, really. So we ended up Airbnb-ing our flat while we did YWAM. We ended up making a little bit. We didn't have the money to do YWAM. By the end of the course, we had made the money required and more to do the course.
Wow.
Through Airbnb on our unit that we were renting out while we did the course. Now, if we hadn't have gone all in and tried to do YWAM, we would have gone into debt to do it. Like, we would have gone backwards. And we somehow didn't have jobs and financially went forwards in life by doing Youth with a Mission because we were obedient to God, saying, just go all in, trust me. So the finances is whack. That happens with so many different people.
Yeah.
Like, God's got it if you're listening. Like, if he's saying do it, do it.
Well, and the cool thing is, like, after I did my school, basically I went back to Colorado, and at the time was planning on coming back to New Zealand to do the Bible school. But yeah, basically everything I lost, God essentially gave back to me. So there was a couple who allowed me to house sit for them while they were living in California. So they gave me their entire house. They gave me their car to use. And then my old boss essentially gave my job back for that time I was home with a raise. And
Oh, you got the raise.
yeah, I got the raise. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, like, and yeah, it's just how God likes to work. Like, you know, like you take, you know, put your neck out there and he, every single time shows up. It's like,
He gets
so
you to
awesome.
walk the walk, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like just handing
not
it out.
easy.
Yeah. When you say it, it's a funny one, because like when you say it, like when I've shared that story about the Airbnb thing, and one of the students said to me, because we did the snowboarding school, and one of the students said to me, Joel, you never come up snowboarding on Saturdays. You're so old.
It's so funny.
And I said to him, I'm doing changeovers and working on Saturday to be able to be at the school. And it was like, God might provide a way, but there's a walk you got to walk. Sometimes, you know, like sometimes he does just, you know, provide it for you. But, you know, I look at anybody in the Bible, and when God says move, it's not easy, you know, Moses walking 40 years in the desert, and Jesus himself having to fast for 40 days, go to the cross. You know, he did so, like, some of the stuff, even when God's telling God to do stuff, and Jesus, it's hard.
It's true.
So I don't know why, definitely shouldn't expect it any easier. Not saying that God only asks us to do stuff, but don't expect it to always be easy is mainly what I'm saying. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. Somebody else can talk. Somebody else can shut me up at any moment. Mute me.
There you go.
God definitely provides, though, when he wants you in a specific place at a specific time.
Yeah.
He will always come through for you.
Yeah.
But you do have to exercise your faith, and you do have to trust him at times, and it is a little bit scary stepping out into the unknown. If you've got that unction or inclination, and you know you've just got to ride and go with that, and then just trust that God will catch you when you step out. And he does.
Amen.
And he does. Yeah.
Paul says he remains content in all things. And that he's been hungry, he's been starving, he's been naked, he's been clothed, he's had money, he's had no money, and he has learnt to remain content in all things. Rose probably knows the exact scripture that I'm talking about. What is it, Rose? I can't remember. I can Google
Don't have it on the top of my head.
I'll Google it.
I was just reading about that this morning.
It's a good one.
What was that? And he's like, the sparrows don't worry about, what is it in Luke when he's like, the sparrows don't worry about what they're going to eat. Like, we shouldn't have to worry about being clothed and fed. Because we know that God will provide for us.
100%.
I've seen it in our life with my wife. We were like, okay, move on jobs because this job sucks. But she was just faithful that God would provide the right job. And she went for interviews and then nothing came up. And then all of a sudden, within like 6 months of looking for a job, COVID happened. People got let go. She stayed on. And now she's got a pay rise and a new job title and all these things. I'm like,
Come on.
what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
a year ago you wanted to leave and now look at you. Put your trust in the Lord that he will provide for you.
And usually whenever that kind of stuff happens, like, I will always tell people, like, the story isn't over yet.
Yeah.
And, I mean, just, like, with my situation with walking through the valley, like, if like, someone were to tell me that, all the stuff that would happen in the future, like, I mean, I don't know. It would be very obvious, like, whoa, like, there's no need to worry. But and so, like, I think sometimes you can let fear, anxiety, all this stuff consume you, and just in that moment. But ultimately, like, the story isn't over yet.
Yeah.
And personally, I have just experienced a lot of redemption in my life. Like, especially during my discipleship training school. It was really, really impactful time for me of just, going deeper with God. And, I mean, we had different lessons like hearing God's voice and learning more about the lordship of God and recognizing that, like, just how holy he is. And, and so during that time, like, God actually was really working in my heart towards my relationship with my family, especially, like, my parents. And, there was a lot of, essentially, bitterness in my heart towards my dad. I guess both my parents, but ultimately, like, like God doesn't want divorce because he knows that A, it's not good for the kids, and B, it's not really like glorifying God, because marriage is something that reflects God and his entity and how he is that Trinity and he's the essence of love. And so essentially when like brokenness creates more brokenness, and so like through my parents' brokenness, I essentially carried on a lot of that burden. But yeah, it was so cool to see God and to recognize essentially who I was in him, and how, like, the more I learned about how I am like his beloved daughter, the more I actually could see my parents in that light. And I could see, like, that even though, like, maybe my dad was, like, Superman who was, stumbled from kryptonite or whatever you want to call it. Like, like sometimes we might look at celebrities or all of these political models or in our lives, and we put them on a pedestal. And ultimately, like, when you put them on a pedestal, you give them the potential to let you down. Yeah. And we can do that with our parents. And so, but it was just such a cool transformation for me, because I could actually see my parents as both a son and a daughter of Christ. Yeah. And so essentially, like, I've learned what true forgiveness was like. And so, like, I actually could see my relationship with my parents change. And it was so much so to the fact that basically, fast forward 4 years later, ended up getting married. And before, like, when right after my parents' divorce, I kind of, like, had pictures of my wedding day, and I actually kind of dreaded the idea. I was like, I can't imagine, like, walking down the aisle with my dad. Like, I just, I just can't imagine that would be a really great day. But just through the redemption that God actually did in my life, and essentially just seeing my parents in that light, essentially, like, I got my parents back, and it ended up that both of them walked me down the aisle, which that in of itself was like huge, because like when the divorce happened, like, they would essentially be on edge, like, on different sides of the room. Yeah. And, like, you could just, like, hear a pineal drop. Like, it was just, you could just feel the tension. But that day was glorious, because, like, I had so much peace that whole time, so much peace and joy. And I knew God did a miracle that day.
Wow. That's amazing. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So you can remain content. Yeah. I found that verse, by the way. For anybody that was wondering, it was Philippians 4:11-13. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed, hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who strengthens me.
It's a good verse.
Yeah, and I was just hearing that verse when you were saying, like, you were able to see these two people in your life that were these pillars in your life, and the identity that God sees them as sons and daughters of God, and not as lost orphans with the orphan spirit, and to see them with what the value of them really truly is, regardless of their shortcomings. And that's the whole reason that Jesus came for us. He saw us. He didn't see us as dirty, rotten sinners. He saw us as redeemed sons and daughters. And that's why the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. And that's why you're saying with your parents, you know, like you didn't see them as potentially what had happened in the past. You didn't put that label or that identity on them, but you put it as the value that Christ has in them, and God sort of like gave you his eyes. This is how I see.
Yeah, I'd say that's right.
See them. Yeah, that's really, really cool. You definitely can see that in you. When you talk to people, you know, you've got this attachment to them that is like it's a genuine care. And you can see that God has pulled something out of you that is way more love that I feel that any person can contain, that it overflows constantly. And it's so cool to see all the time.
Come on.
Yeah, really cool. You definitely see God's reflection in you.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Coming towards the end of our time, have you got anything you'd want to share with anyone, like to encourage them to, like little short quotes?
Short quotes.
Rose quotes.
Actually, probably something would be good. I don't know, just jump in here.
Go for it.
What if somebody else is going through their parents are getting divorced? What's something you would encourage them in? Anybody that's listening right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually, in some ways, lived through it twice, because one of my close friends back at home actually went through a divorce as well, and something I kept on encouraging her with is the story isn't over yet. And so sometimes I think when people are going through that valley, whether it's your parents' divorce or I think with COVID, like especially here in Queenstown, like a lot of people have lost jobs or, I mean, lost family, and so it's a really hard time. And so I guess I would, being that person, I would, essentially just grab hold of the hope that the story isn't over yet. And if maybe your relative or friend is going through that, I would say just sometimes people just need you to be there with them. Like, you don't have to fix the problem or try to say some solution, but there's something about even just your presence and what you have to offer. Just, God actually, his fingerprints are all over us. And so sometimes the greatest gift is having that relationship with one another and to offer that love to one another. And so I think that's where our strength lies in humanity, is when we actually are there for one another. And God created us for a relationship. And so, I hope that's an encouragement to everyone listening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Rose.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. The story is not over.
It's not over yet.
Keep living your life for the Lord.
Yeah.
Cool.
Make sure you find us on the Jesus Magnet on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and that's it.
Bebo.
Yeah. We should get a Snapchat. Let us know if we need a Snapchat. Send us a message.
Who still uses Snapchat?
I don't know. Is it still a thing?
No. Well, on that bummer of a note, catch you next time.